My name is Jack. I'm alcoholic. Thank you for keeping your cameras on. I'm one of those speakers that likes to see faces laughing to make me know that I'm not laughing at myself. I'll give you my AA resume, right? My name is Jack. I'm alcoholic. I have a sponsor who knows he's my sponsor. He's also Anthony's sponsor. So you can tell he's really good at picking sponsees who are level-headed and doing this deal. My sobriety date is May 8th of 2012, and I haven't found it necessary to pick up a drink or a drug or any other mind or mood altering substance since I sat down with the sponsor, cracked open the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, went through them to the best of my ability, and started sharing them with others. And it's really that simple. We complicate things. We make mountains out of molehills, and that's what makes us able to identify. You know, I see people from all over the country, I guess potentially all over the world. And, during the whole pandemic deal, I used to really not like Zoom because I'm a big fellowship guy. But I realized that there's a really good place for this. And I was able to attend some meetings in Australia and Ireland and stuff from my living room. And that's rad. I'm super honored to be with you guys tonight. So I'll give you the snapshot version of my story. I was born into an Irish Catholic family in Point Pleasant, New Jersey. There was no Martin Scorsese childhood. I did not grow up in the hood. We had a boat in the backyard. And, I didn't wear shoes until I was like 17 years old. And I surfed a lot and I ran around town. And I'm not one of those people that can really identify with not having a group of friends. I was an athlete. I played a lot of sports. I was involved in a lot of extracurricular activities. The thing is that I always felt like there was something missing from way, way before I started to ever even think about picking up a drink or a drug or anything else. I just felt like there was something missing in my life. The big book talks about seeing normal drinkers drink with impunity. And I thought people just lived life with impunity. I was looking around at people and going like, how is this guy just so comfortable in his own skin? A very dear friend of mine, oddly, who has the same exact name as Anthony, it says, I felt like I was in a pair of jeans that was just like a half a size too tight for my entire life. And I can get down with that, right? Like that just uncomfortability. That it's not like that annoying, but like every time I sit down, I'm like get kind of restless and I just don't really know, like that was just such a simple analogy and it just made so much sense to me. So my parents got divorced when I was about 7 years old. And my dad, he's not like the most touchy-feely dude. He's kind of like that old classic stoic Irish Catholic dude that wears like a blue blazer and khakis all the time and is real straight-laced. And I'm a surfer, artist, musician, total knucklehead that doesn't want to do anything else except have fun. And we never really saw eye to eye entirely. So my dad, even when I was 7 years old, he brought me to Haagen-Dazs. He told me that I needed to tell my mother and my sisters that he was going on a business trip and he didn't know when he was going to come back. And I'm like, dude, I'm 7. This isn't going to work out that well. I don't think I'm going to be able to articulate this the way you want me to. Maybe you should talk to them. So my first ever resentment was my father. And the second one was Haagen-Dazs. For years, I didn't go to Haagen-Dazs ice cream. Like I would pick another ice cream spot. It was like, that was the spot. That was the reason. And that's what I do in my entire life. That's like once I sat down with a sponsor and started doing inventory, we kind of identified that's pretty indicative of me, right? Like if something's uncomfortable for me, it's dead to me, even if it's an ice cream place that had absolutely nothing to do with the situation. So my first real addiction, I would say, was shoplifting. Before I ever knew that I was an alcoholic and I was trying to fill that void, I would go and try to find the most out of shape security guard, steal a pack of cigarettes in front of them, run out of the supermarket, dragging the tail of my Steve Caballero skateboard, jump on it and take off as quickly as possible. That was like the high and the rush for me. So that got me in trouble early. Like early on, I was getting arrested a bunch. And, when you're a kid, you don't really get arrested. Like you get brought to the police station, somebody has to pick you up and you get in trouble. So I did that all the way until 8th grade. In 8th grade, it started to escalate a little bit. My mother, who I was living with at the time, she suffers from this disease. She is now 29 years sober, but I'm 44 years old. So let's do the math. There was a lot of time there where there was definitely out of control drinking in my household. And again, I said I didn't have a Martin Scorsese childhood, but I do remember like my mom crashing into my friend's garage to come pick me up from band practice. I do remember like sitting outside of the school and waiting for mom to come pick me up. And, we all know if we've been through these 12 steps, and congratulations to all these guys counting days, none of the stuff that happened in my past makes me alcoholic. I want to make that clear. What makes me alcoholic is what it says in the doctor's opinion of Alcoholics Anonymous, that once I pick up a drink, I cannot say definitively when I'm going to stop. And when I stop, I can't say definitively when I'm going to start again. And if I'm going to stay stopped for any period of time, I need to have a sufficient substitute or I'm going to be miserable. What happened is I got thrown out of school in 8th grade because my mom woke up one morning and had a little bit too much to drink. And my sister opened up her backpack and she had the Transformers lunchbox, which left me with the My Little Pony one. Now that's fine if you love My Little Pony. When you're in 8th grade and you're a boy, you get ripped on for stuff like that. And this kid, Mike Kelly, who's not in AA, so I don't care about his anonymity, he started ripping on me, and I did what any well-adjusted 8th grader would do. And I picked up, you guys remember those public school chairs that like connected to that like stone desk? It was like a piece of stone attached to a metal chair. Well, I thought it would be a really good idea to use that as a weapon and throw it at Mike. And I missed him and I hit the window behind him and shattered it. That was the second time that I had been suspended from school in 8th grade. So I get sent home. They call my mom. She doesn't answer the phone. They call my cool cousin Kelly. She comes to pick me up. And when she picks me up, she's like, you've been getting into a lot of trouble lately. I always told you it's okay if you're going to smoke a little pot. It's okay if you drink a little, just don't get caught. You've been getting caught a lot lately, blah, blah, blah. So now the only person that I feel like I ever had any kind of a connection with that understood me is starting to have feelings about the way I'm living my life. And it's the only way I know, right? Because if you guys were like me, and I'm guessing that if you're on a meeting on the computer at 9:30 at night, you probably identify with this, is that when I drink, there's somewhere right around like 3 beers and like a Marlboro Red that I'm like, this is what I was looking for. Where the TV department at Walmart that is inside of my head playing all these different movies about how I screwed up and what I missed out on and what I should have showed up for and didn't and why, and all this going on at the same time just gets quiet. And that was all I was ever looking for. It's just that like deep breath, that like, where like the world doesn't feel so heavy anymore. But if you're like me, I overshoot the mark and I do it over and over and over again. When I'm getting home from school, I remember I'm in 8th grade. I've had some drinks, but I have never really been drunk yet. But I equated that when I came home and my mother was happy to see me and my sister and asking us how our day was and stuff, she was a little tipsy. And when I came home and she was talking about how my father left and he's got a new family and he doesn't care about us and all this gloom and doom stuff, she was stark raving sober. Something in my little 8th grade brain was like, I wonder what that stuff does. That magic elixir that she drinks all the time has got to be the answer to my problems, because I could see the restlessness, the irritability, and the discontent on my mother's face when she wasn't drinking. And when she was, it wasn't there. So I got home and she was passed out on the couch, and there was a red Solo cup on the table and a handle of Doors that had about that much left in it. Not enough to get me real drunk, but enough to pour it in that Solo cup, drink it down, get that. And in that moment, my perception changed. I didn't become a daily drinker at that time, but I knew that I had a solution at that time. In retrospect, that moment was my first spiritual experience, because I got some kind of release. I got some kind of relief. I didn't feel like I was wearing that jeans that was a half a size too small anymore. I didn't feel like my skin didn't fit. I didn't feel like my shoulders were heavy. I didn't feel like I couldn't breathe. I didn't feel like I had to crack my neck. I just felt okay. And I chased it. So to fast forward a whole bunch, arrested a whole bunch of other times between 8th grade and 9th grade. In 8th grade, I got asked to leave the school once and for all. I got sent to this boarding school. I get to the boarding school. The first thing I do is find somebody who parties like me. Almost got kicked out on the first day. Lasted there for another couple of years, trying to get kicked out because I'm in the middle of New Jersey, out by PA. and I'm a surfer and all I want to do is go home and get in the water and I don't want to be here and I'm trying to get kicked out, but the disciplinary guy has got my number. So instead of kicking me out, I have to like mow the lawn and like do all this other stuff. Once I get comfortable there, I get thrown out. I get sent home. I'm grounded forever. And like any well-adjusted kid would do, after a couple of days, I decided that I needed to get out. I needed to drink. I needed to feel okay. So I climbed down the roof of my parents' house, got onto the sand, and ran down the outside of the bay to my friend Ryan's house where there was a party going on. And I know this is AA, and I respect our singleness of purpose. But let me just tell you this. Any powder potion, pill, or plant that can take me out of me, I'm going to chase it. That's my experience, and you can't argue with my experience. If you don't like it, I'm sorry. So I went to this party and I drank a whole bunch of whiskey and I did a whole bunch of other stuff. And this non-conference approved substance that we'll call angel dust because it was angel dust. I did that, and this non-conference approved substance called Roxy's. I did those two. And I woke up handcuffed to a hospital bed with absolutely no idea how I got there. There's a cop in the corner of the room, and I asked him, like, sir, can you tell me what happened? And he goes, don't worry about that right now, son. You know, that's the cop answer when you did something real bad. I come to find out later on, like I told you, my dad's like super stoic guy, doesn't really show a whole lot of emotion. And he was like crying, and he's like, what's wrong with you? And if I gave him a really honest answer, it was, I don't know, but there's definitely something wrong with me. And the only way that I can feel okay is to do this. But what I said is, I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with me. And he said, well, let me recap you on what happened last night. You showed up to your friend's house. Your friends said you were drunk and belligerent when you got there. I don't recall any of that. After the powders, potions, pills, and plants entered the scene, my friend's dad came home late at night to break up the party, and I wrapped my hands around his throat and tried to kill him. Have no idea about that at all. He said shortly after that, they called the ambulance because you were completely out of control. And in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, you flatlined and were revived. And I'm like, really? I don't remember any of that. And he's like, that's a problem. And anybody in that moment would agree. I was facing real jail time because I had a bunch of money and a bunch of drugs on me, and I'm 17 years old. And I found that when your life is unmanageable, the state of New Jersey is more than happy to manage it for you. And whatever state you're in is more than happy to manage your life for you when your life is unmanageable. And that's exactly what happened. You know, court, facing jail time. My dad spent a lot of money and got a lawyer because I'm that kid that just got bailed out. If I'm being totally honest, I got bailed out of a lot of stuff. I got what was called a continuance, and I'm guessing it was similar to what like drug court is now, right? Where I had to maintain a grade point average. I had to go to meetings. I had to go to a PO. I had to go to a drug and alcohol counselor. I had to go to this outpatient group therapy. I had to get my paper signed. I had to come sit with you guys for an hour, and that's all I did. And what I learned is that I can hold my breath for about 18 months. Because the 18 months of my senior year of high school, I was sober and clean. Rather, I was dry and clean. Sobriety is a state of mind. I can project my alcoholism into anything, right? Like, so was killing it in sports. I was killing it in school because I was looking for validation in other things. I liked the people patting me on the back and be like, Jack, it seems like you're doing really, really well. I'm like, yeah, thanks. You know, when you don't use drugs and drink, like you do better. You do better. You do better than you do when you're using them, especially the way I was. But you know, I wanted to kill myself. I was at my senior prom watching everybody have fun, and I drank like, I don't know, 12 Mountain Dews just to try to keep up with everybody drinking beers and like feel like I had something in my hand. So now like my anxiety's through the roof. You know what I mean? I drank all the caffeine, and like I'm already anxious and I already don't feel uncomfortable, and I'm just losing it. And that was like, it sounds silly, but like remembering what's supposed to be something that was like really important. Like, oh, did you go to your prom? Yeah, my prom sucked. I don't remember anything about the prom except how uncomfortable I was. And it was probably an awesome time, but I'm so selfish and self-centered that I'll just look at how uncomfortable I was and not see anything else. And that's like my entire childhood. My mom asked me all the time, hey, do you remember? No, I don't. I don't remember at all because I was thinking about me. I wasn't enjoying our family trip to Vermont. I don't remember. I was thinking about myself and how uncomfortable I was. And I mean, I could really say thanks for letting me share right there because that's my story throughout. So fast forward, I get court ordered to go to these meetings. I have to get my paper signed. I hold my breath for 18 months. I got into college because I did well in school and I did well in sports and I got a little scholarship. I went away, stopped talking to my sponsor, who I had name only. We never cracked the book. Stopped going to meetings, stopped talking to the girl that I met in the meetings, stopped doing all of the things that connected me in any way to any form of recovery. And I went to school. And I didn't drink when I was there because I was afraid of the consequences of what had happened in the past. But I came home that Thanksgiving. My dad sat me down. He said, that was a weird phase of your life. I'm so proud of you. You're doing so well. Would you like to have a couple beers with me? And this is where everybody goes, but he didn't know. He doesn't know what alcoholism is. He doesn't know what we suffer from at the time. I've since taught him a lot about it, but he says, let's have a couple of beers. So I did that. And the worst thing that could ever happen to a person like me happened that night. And it's nothing at all. Nothing happened. I didn't get in trouble. I didn't even get drunk. I woke up the next morning and my first reaction was, yes, I can drink again. Normal people don't react to that. They don't react that way. They're like, oh, that was a good time. About to get to hang out with dad. I was thinking about a week and a half from then when I went back to school and how much beer I was going to drink at the kegger. So after that, it only took about 9 months for me to get thrown out of that school for just deplorable grade point average and doing all kinds of things that are not legal in any place, let alone in a college dorm room. And instead of going home and being like, Dad, I messed up again, I just moved into this motel, like mirrors on the ceiling and like blood stain on the floor. And I had a job working as a bar back in this crappy bar, and I was making enough money to pay the rent at this crappy motel and to just die. That was my plan. I just filled myself with whatever I could get my hands on. I should back up a little bit. My mom got sober in AA about a year before this went down. And she was the only person that I talked to because she was a good member of Alcoholics Anonymous. She wasn't beating me with the big book. She was just letting me know the lifeline is right here. All you have to do is grab for it. She didn't hear from me. So she started reaching out to my friends. My friends told her where I was. She came, she picked me up. She drove me from Long Island back down here and said, do you want to go to a meeting with me? I went to one. I looked around, told all of you guys that you were doing it wrong, that you guys are stupid, God doesn't exist, and I'm out. For the next 15 years, I would build up some semblance of success and tear it to the ground. Build up some relationships and tear them to the ground, just over and over and over again. This yo-yo. And I would come back in to Alcoholics Anonymous to tell you that God was created to explain what science couldn't explain yet. And I can't do those steps because it says God on them. And what happened is 16 years later, at 34 years old, I'm staying in an apartment with a woman of my dreams who's trying to fix me. And she's leaving and I'm vomiting blood and I don't have a job and my car is repossessed and I don't have any prospects whatsoever in what I'm going to do with my life. I don't surf. I don't skateboard. I don't play my guitar anymore. I'm just worthless. The party has sailed. I'm drinking and using drugs. It's just against my will. You know what I mean? I'm doing that thing where this is a seltzer, but we're looking at the bottom of the drink and spinning it around, thinking this is a really bad idea and then just doing it anyway. And life's great. I wake up every morning upset that I woke up. I try to kill myself. I ate half a bottle of prescription pills and chased it with a bottle of Jameson. And I woke up the next morning and I felt like such a loser because I can't even kill myself properly. And this goes on and on and on until the girl that I was talking about, she's leaving and I'm in an apartment that I'm behind on the bills. And I'm doing that thing where you leave before the landlord gets up and come back after he's already asleep because you need a place to stay, but you can't show up because he's going to ask you for money and you don't have any. I'm in that world. And I come home one night and she says to me, when are you going to realize you're an alcoholic? And, I knew I'd been to meetings before, but I said, no, I'm not. I'll prove it to you. And she said, fine, 30 days, nothing. You can't even smoke trees, nothing, absolutely nothing. I said, fine, no problem. I made it 7 days. I didn't make a conscious decision to be I'm going to break this girl's heart. I just changed my mind. In my perspective, I just changed my mind. I'm just going to go back to it. So I go out and my intention was to go out and have 2 beers and a burger and watch a Yankee game. And instead I came home absolutely hammered, looking like I just shoved a powdered donut underneath my nose, just wrecked. My jaw's out to here like Quagmire. She's so upset with me. She says, I don't care what you're doing, but I'm leaving. And at this time I had been living in Asbury Park. I don't know if you guys know where that is, but in Asbury Park, you can find anything. And there's some really nice areas and there's some pretty sketchy areas. And I've been in all of them. But I did what any guy who has been hardened by the streets would do. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, I called my mom, who was 20 years sober. And I said, Mom, I think I'm an alcoholic. And she laughed and said, you think so? And I said, yeah. And she's like, all right, well, go to bed and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Next morning, I wake up and I have like vague recollection of talking to my mother, but no recollection of what I actually said. She's knocking on the door with a pork leg and cheese and a bottle of Gatorade. And she's like, drink this, eat this, we're going to a meeting. And my immediate reaction is, Mom, I think I overreacted. And she said, overreacted? What I could decipher between your snot bubble tears last night was that you felt like the world would be a better place if you weren't in it, that you didn't have passion for anything anymore, and that you can't imagine drinking another day, but you can't imagine not drinking. And I was like, shit, man. I got drunk enough to say what I've been trying to say from the first time I ever picked up. So she takes me to a meeting, and it wasn't a pocket of enthusiasm. It was a regular meeting with regular people, and it was nobody was talking about the steps to my knowledge. I don't know what I heard, but something happened that day that I cannot describe in any other way other than divine intervention. Because I just stopped. I had been to rehab. I'd been to jail. I just stopped and started going to meetings. And I started feeling my way around. And, at the time I was 34 years old. I'm 44 now. This is a young people's meeting. I realized that. When I came in at 34 years old, I had the mental capacity of a 14-year-old. I was hanging out with people that were 15 years younger than I am because they were kind of on the same level as me. So I'm looking around for young people because my perception was I went to meetings and I was the youngest one in there by a landslide. And I got linked up with these guys. My home group is called Solution on the Shore, and it meets in Neptune, New Jersey. My sponsor, I picked him because I went to a food and fellowship meeting. He had a bunch of tattoos. I have a bunch of tattoos. And he had 2 pieces of fried chicken in his hand. So I didn't think there was any way that he could actually talk to me about the steps or God or any of that stuff. So I sat across the table from him, and this guy, my first sponsor, Anthony, said, do you have a sponsor? And I wanted to say, yeah, I have 2. Don't worry about me. I'm good. I'm sponsored by Quicksilver. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. Instead, what came out of my mouth was, no, I don't. And he said, well, you think you can stay sober until about 6 o'clock tomorrow night? And I said, I can try. He said, cool, be outside of your house at 6 o'clock. If you're not out there at 6 o'clock, I'm going to leave. And I'm like, this guy thinks he's important. So I was a tough guy, and I waited till 5:59 and then walked out of the door, and he was waiting there. And the window rolled down in his car, which is a really nice car. And I'm like, I want that car. This guy has what I want. And he said, the thing that has kept me sober, and I believe kept most of my sponsees sober, because I talk to him about it all the time, one of the most spiritual things you can hear in Alcoholics Anonymous is get in the car. Because you get in the car, and on the ride to the meeting, you're talking about the stuff that you're not going to talk about in front of everybody else. And that's the stuff that's relatable. And the one thing that he said to me that got me hook, line, and sinker is that when he was a little kid, he wanted to go ride bikes with the kids in the neighborhood. So he'd ride his bike over to all the kids in the neighborhood, and he'd put his kickstand down, and he'd walk over to one of them and he'd punch him in the face. Because punching him in the face and being labeled the crazy guy who just walked up to me and punched me in the face is better than being rejected. And I was like, that's my dude. He understands the way my mind processes things. That's the one that got me. He tells me to go through these steps. He, tells me to read the doctor's opinion. And it answers that question that I asked before. Everybody asked me, Jack, what's wrong with you? There it is, in black and white in the doctor's opinion, that I'm restless, irritable, and discontent until I can drink. And when I drink, that restless, irritable, and discontent shuts off. But I overshoot the mark every time. I'll go out and want to have a couple of drinks and wind up waking up in North Carolina. That happened to me. I'll go out to have a couple of drinks and wake up naked on the floor of a dentist's office. That also happened to me. I meet up with this guy, and he showed me through his actions. He wasn't just a man who was telling me what to do. He was a man who was showing me through his actions what it is that he does. He was bringing me to jails. He was bringing me to institutions. He was bringing me to other meetings, and I was watching him speak and how he talks to people. And I recognized that he used to party and feel like I do, which is more important. It doesn't matter how you partied or what your thing was. If you identify as being an alcoholic, you know what the feelings feel like. And I knew that this guy was inwardly reorganized. So I followed him. To speed up, it's been 10 years, mind-boggling to me still. Went through these steps. I did a thorough inventory. I shared the deepest, darkest secrets with this man. I went out. I vigorously sought my amends. He taught me 10, 11, and 12, and I started meditating and praying and doing nightly inventory and helping other guys. And it was in helping other guys that I started to have a belief in God. My best friend, both before AA and, spoiler alert, after coming to AA, When I first got sober, he was making fun of me. You're only getting sober because of that girl. You're a sellout, blah, 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 blah. So I called my sponsor. I'm like, what am I going to do? I want to punch this guy in the face. He said, why don't you pray for him? And I said, Anthony, how many times do I have to tell you I don't believe in God? And he said, how many times do I have to tell you I don't care? That's what the directions are. I'm at work. I got to go. And I'm like, here's this self-important guy again that's telling me what to do. So my prayer was like this: God, or whatever, help my friend, I guess. Cool, thanks. 3 days later, I'm driving down 71 in Asbury Park, where you can find anything that you could ever possibly want. And I see Chris walking with his hood up, smoking a cigarette with that, like, newcomer uniform where your belt is pulled so tight and there's like 6 other holes in it. And it's like hanging down to your knee, and you're dirty and you haven't showered. Like he's not looking his best. I've seen him look a lot better. He says, hey man, are you still going to those meetings? And I said, yeah. He's like, will you bring me? I'm like, yeah, get in. I got to be the best man at that guy's wedding. That was God showing up in my life just through taking the action. One thing that my former sponsor and my sponsor now talk about often is that we are not in the results business. We are in the action business. It's about the actions that we take, and we let our higher power, whom I call God, control the outcome. And you accept it, and your life is easier for just being like, okay, that's what's happening. And there's crazy stuff happening. Yeah, my wife is 9 months pregnant right now. And we went to the doctor this morning. And from the doctor, they rushed her to the hospital. And I did my first 4 haircuts at the barbershop this morning, not knowing whether or not my wife was going to go into labor. And then she called me and she's like, nope, they sent me home. So like, that's where we're at right now, which is a pretty insane place in life to be. But I never say no to AA. Because guys that I've sponsored and met in meetings and the people that I've connected with have brought me through a path that has not always been sunny. This baby's a miracle. My wife had 5 miscarriages. We've been trying for 7 years. This baby's coming, maybe today. You know what I mean? Like, that's a miracle. But it was something that I had to live through. You know what I mean? I've buried 14 friends. I've buried 3 sponsees. Nothing's harder than hugging somebody's dad and them saying, like, he was doing so good when he was with you guys. I've had lots of money and I've had none. I've been not knowing where I was going to live the next day, and I own a beautiful home. Like, there's so many ups and downs in life, but your reaction to it, my reaction to it now is much more like, yeah, it was a little up, it was a little down, but it's not like these manic highs and depressive lows anymore. And I'm able to hold on. And one of the best things about Alcoholics Anonymous is that we're told in our 12th suggestion to share this message. To see the light come on in other people's eyes over the past 10 years, it's one thing I've never stopped doing. I haven't been a perfect AA member, but I've never stopped reaching my hand out and saying, I can sponsor you. Come with me. I'll show you how to do this thing. Because those guys have saved my life. When I have those bad days and I'm ready to make a rash decision, one of them calls me. And when I listen to them and I'm intent in listening to them and trying to be like, okay, this is a life and death situation for this kid, my thing gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And I don't feel those same tensions like I was talking about before I drank, that my shoulders are getting tight, it's hard to breathe. I don't feel that anxiety. My alcoholism manifests in that way. And it's been my experience that doing this process, getting a relationship with a God of my total misunderstanding, and sharing this message with other people and saying yes when Anthony asked me to speak on a Zoom meeting at 10:30 at night when my wife could go into labor in any minute, and just saying no problem, has been what's kept me sober. Because what am I going to be doing right now? Sitting around being like, are you okay? Are you good? Are you good? She's going to go, babe, get the hell out of the room. So I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say. And thank you for having me out tonight. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Fifth Dimension. My name's Jack. Thanks.